The morning started with the kind of silence that feels suspicious, too calm, too slow, like the world is holding its breath before something goes wrong. I was halfway through my first sip of coffee when a violent knock exploded against my front door. Not a polite tap. Not a neighborly hello. This was the kind of knock meant to intimidate, the kind that announces trouble before you even open the door. When I pulled it open, 3 HOA board members stood there lined up like a firing squad. Their president, Marla Graves, stared at me with a smile that wasn't a smile at all, more like a sneer carved into her face. She held something between 2 fingers, waving it at me like it was evidence in a crime scene. "You dropped this yesterday," she said. It was my ID. The one I wasn't supposed to lose. The one I wasn't supposed to show. The one that wasn't supposed to be in anyone's hands except law enforcement supervisors and specific classified units. But instead of treating it seriously, Marla lifted it like a toy. "Fake," she declared. We all looked at it. We had a good laugh. Behind her, the other board members giggled like school kids. One of them whispered, loud enough for me to hear, "He probably prints these in his garage." My gut tightened. They had no idea what they were touching, what rules they were breaking, what kind of spiral they were about to send themselves into. But I kept my voice steady. "That's federal property. You're not allowed to hold it." Marla scoffed. "Federal? Oh please. You. We already reported you for impersonation. And your truck," she jerked her thumb toward my driveway, "is being towed at noon. We voted unanimously." For a moment, I didn't say anything. I didn't need to, the stupidity was loud enough. My truck wasn't a normal truck. Anyone with half a brain could see that. The reinforced chassis, the coated panels, the concealed response equipment, everything about it screamed emergency operations. But the problem was, I couldn't say that out loud. Couldn't explain. Couldn't defend myself. Classified meant classified. So I said the only thing I could, "Don't tow the truck." Marla smirked. "Watch us." They walked off feeling victorious, leaving me on the porch with anger simmering under my ribs. At exactly 9:03 a.m., a tow truck rumbled into the neighborhood, followed by 2 local police cruisers. Kids on bikes gathered like they were watching a parade. Neighbors peeked from windows. Phones pointed at my driveway. The HOA members stood proudly near the curb like they were hosting an event. Officer Danvers approached me with a smirk. "Sir, HOA says this vehicle is unauthorized and you presented a fake badge." I handed him my real ID, the actual one. He took one glance and burst out laughing. "Bro, come on. This is terrible. Even the holograms look fake." The crowd chuckled. My jaw clenched, but I stayed silent. Because I knew something they didn't. Danvers didn't have the clearance to verify the ID even if it was genuine. Marla strutted up, full of confidence. "Chief's on his way," she said. "He hates imposters." My stomach dropped, not in fear, but because this was about to go very, very public. And that was dangerous. For me. For them. For everyone. The tow truck hooked onto my vehicle just as the police chief's SUV turned the corner. The HOA straightened like soldiers. The crowd leaned forward. I let out a slow breath. This was the beginning of the explosion. Chief Rowan stepped out of his SUV with the calm, heavy presence of a man who had spent a lifetime walking into chaos and putting it back in order. His uniform wasn't crisp, he never cared about perfectly pressed seams, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the scene with a mixture of annoyance and disappointment. The HOA members rushed toward him like overeager children trying to impress a teacher. Marla was in the lead, clutching the stolen ID like it was her personal trophy. "Chief, thank goodness you're here," she said breathlessly. "We caught someone impersonating federal emergency staff. He tried to use this fake badge, and he's keeping an illegal vehicle on community property." She offered the ID up like a sacrifice. Rowan took it without a word, but the second his eyes landed on it, something in his face shifted, just barely, but enough for me to catch it. A flicker of recognition. A flicker of oh no. The HOA didn't notice. They were too busy smiling like they'd already won. Rowan closed the small distance between us, the ID still in his hand. "Morning," he said quietly, as if this were just another routine check. "Morning," I replied. "You want this handled quietly?" he asked. "Please," I said. "Too many spectators." Rowan nodded once, then pivoted sharply toward Officer Danvers and the tow truck driver. "Unhook that truck," he ordered. Danvers frowned, confused. "Sir, the HOA filed an official report." "They said," "I don't care what they said," Rowan snapped, voice suddenly edged with steel. "Unhook it. Right now." The tow truck driver hesitated until Rowan gave him one long, hard stare. Then he scrambled to remove the straps, practically tripping over himself. Conversations across the neighborhood died instantly. Marla blinked, stunned. "Chief, what are you doing?" "He's lying. That badge is fake. Look at it." "I did," Rowan said, his voice calm but dangerous. "And this badge is real." Silence dropped over the street like a blanket. A stillness so heavy it felt like air thickened. One of the HOA board members let out a tiny squeak. Danvers looked like someone had yanked the soul out of his body. "Real?" he whispered, eyes widening. Rowan nodded. "Real. And highly restricted." Marla's throat bobbed as she swallowed. But he doesn't appear in any HOA records as emergency staff." We checked. "That's because his job isn't something we publish in community newsletters," Rowan said dryly. He handed me back my ID with a careful respect he rarely showed anyone. "This vehicle," he continued, turning to the HOA, "is classified emergency equipment. You had no authority to tow it. You had no authority to confiscate identification. And you certainly had no authority to accuse him of impersonation." The vice president stepped forward, face pale. "We were just enforcing rules." "Rules," Rowan repeated slowly, "do not override federal law." Marla opened her mouth, but no sound came out. For the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. Not of me, but of what she'd done. Rowan wasn't finished. He addressed the crowd now forming around us. "For everyone's understanding," he said, "classified personnel are not required to disclose their roles. They are here for your safety. Interference with their work endangers this community." The murmurs rose again, but this time they weren't mocking. They were uneasy, uncertain, shifting into respect or fear. Rowan leaned toward me and whispered, "You okay?" "For now," I murmured. "But they're not done." Rowan sighed. "I know." And he did. Because people like the HOA didn't learn the first time they were wrong. They only learned when the consequences finally hit, hard. And their lesson was just beginning. The hours after Rowan left dragged on like a slow, heavy storm building over the neighborhood, quiet on the surface, but full of electricity underneath. People walked by my house more carefully now, their steps a little slower, their eyes darting toward my driveway before looking away quickly as if making eye contact with me would put them on some kind of list. I wasn't surprised. Most people don't know how to act around someone they suddenly believe might be higher clearance than the local police chief. I tried to lose myself in work and routine, cleaning equipment in the garage, tightening bolts, checking sealed compartments. My hands stayed busy, but my mind kept drifting back to the HOA. Something in Rowan's tone, the way he said, "They're not done," kept replaying in my head like an echo I couldn't silence. And he was right. They weren't finished, not by a long shot. I heard footsteps behind me and turned, expecting another HOA ambush, but it was Marla. She hesitated in the doorway like she wasn't sure whether to come in or run. The confidence she always wore like armor was gone, replaced with something smaller, trembling at the edges. She held out a small envelope with both hands. "I came to return your ID," she said quietly. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have taken it." Her voice sounded like it had been scraped raw. I didn't take the envelope at first. I just stared at her, wondering if this was another setup, another performance. But her eyes weren't sharp or mocking now, they were ashamed. Truly ashamed. I finally took the envelope and set it on the workbench. "You should have just put it in my mailbox," I said. "I know," she whispered. "But I wanted to talk to you." She glanced around the garage at the equipment she once called illegal clutter. "I didn't know," she whispered, "about any of this." I didn't have the energy to comfort her. "You didn't want to know," I replied. "You assumed." Marla's lips trembled as she nodded. "I know. And I'm sorry. Really." For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, this whole nightmare was smoothing out. Maybe the street would quiet down again. Maybe the HOA had learned. But then 3 vehicles stopped outside the house, doors slamming, voices rising, clipboards snapping open. The rest of the HOA board. Marla's shoulders slumped as she whispered, "I didn't call them." The vice president marched up the driveway like he was leading a military operation. "We held an emergency meeting," he declared. "Due to resident complaints, we are issuing new violations." He thrust a stack of papers toward me thick enough to choke a shredder. "Your truck's lights violate brightness codes. Your presence is causing distress among families. And your vehicle must be removed within 72 hours or you will be fined daily." I stared at him, almost laughing from the sheer stupidity. "You can't fine federal equipment." "We'll see about that," he shot back. Marla stepped forward. "Stop this. You don't understand, stay out of this," the vice president snapped. "You're compromised." Compromised. As if treating me like a human being was now a weakness. I didn't tear the violations or shout. I just pulled out my phone and called Rowan. He must have been waiting, because he answered on the first ring and arrived in 10 minutes. No sirens, no lights, just anger walking on 2 legs. When he saw the stack of violations, he blew out a long breath. "You people don't know when to quit," he said. The vice president puffed his chest. "We're enforcing community rules." Rowan's jaw tightened. Federal law outranks community rules. But the vice president didn't back down. And that was when Rowan called for backup, not police this time. Something else. Something worse for the HOA. Something that was about to change the entire tone of the fight. And when those unmarked SUVs rolled in, the HOA finally realized, they had just crossed a line they couldn't uncross. The next morning arrived with a strange quiet, almost too calm considering the storm the HOA had stirred the day before, but I didn't let the silence fool me, because silence in this neighborhood always meant someone was planning something. I stepped outside with a mug of coffee, hoping for a normal day, but normal wasn't something the HOA ever allowed me to have. 2 black SUVs rolled slowly down the street, unmarked but unmistakably federal, the kind of vehicles that made even the nosiest neighbors shut their curtains. The HOA president, Marcia Tate, strutted out of her house the moment she saw them, her eyes shining like she believed she finally had the leverage to crush me. "There," she said loudly, pointing at me as if she'd caught a fugitive, "that's the man impersonating a federal worker. I demand he be arrested for flashing a fake ID yesterday." The agents didn't even glance at her, they walked straight toward me with firm, controlled steps, their expressions unreadable but respectful. "Morning," the lead agent said quietly. "We need a moment. Your classification review came through faster than expected." Marcia froze. "Classification review?" she whispered, looking between us, confused and uncomfortable. I nodded, keeping my voice steady but tired, because dealing with the HOA felt more exhausting than any mission I'd handled before. Standard protocol, I said, letting Marcia overhear on purpose. Especially when someone keeps reporting me. The agent scratched his jaw and looked at Marcia with the kind of calm pity that felt like a slap. Ma'am, you filed a report accusing him of fraud. She straightened, lifting her chin like she was about to deliver a TED talk. Yes. He's been driving a fake emergency vehicle, using a fake ID, and pretending to have federal authority. He's a threat to our community. The second agent actually chuckled, which only made Marcia angrier. Is something funny? Just ironic, he said, holding up a sealed folder stamped with a level of clearance no suburban HOA president should ever see. Because this man is not only legitimate, he's more verified than half the people we work with. The color drained from her face so fast it almost looked like she'd faint. What do you mean verified? She stuttered. The first agent turned to me. We're here to review your readiness status, he said. With everything happening lately, we may need you active again. My stomach tightened, not from fear, but from a conflict I never fully resolved. I retired for a reason. I wanted peace, quiet, a normal life. But the kind of work I did never fully released you. Behind me, a few neighbors peeked through their blinds, their faces pale. They had no idea what I used to be, what I still might be. Marcia took a shaky step back. So, you're actually, government? She asked. I met her eyes calmly. I told you yesterday my ID wasn't fake. But why would someone like you live here? In this neighborhood? To be left alone, I said, and the words hung heavier than I expected. The agents exchanged a look and then opened the folder for me. Inside were documents, orders, a confirmation of the identity Marcia had been calling fake. The look on her face became pure horror, like she suddenly realized she hadn't just meddled in HOA business, she'd poked something far bigger. We'll give you time to consider, the lead agent said. But for now, we need to confirm your presence is secure. He glanced at the HOA president. And that no local interference compromises classified personnel again. Marcia swallowed hard and whispered, I didn't know. You weren't supposed to, I replied. But deep inside, another thought formed, quiet, unsettling, impossible to ignore. If they came in person, something serious must be happening. And for the first time since retirement, I felt the old world creeping back. The world I thought I had escaped. That night, long after the federal SUVs had disappeared and the neighborhood lights had dimmed to a restless, uneasy glow, I sat alone in my living room, the classified folder still resting on the table like a silent ultimatum. I hadn't opened it again, not yet, but its presence felt heavier than any weight I'd carried in years. I'd faced hostile borders, war zones, covert extractions, but somehow the thought of being pulled back into that life felt more dangerous than all of it combined. Outside, the street lay still, except for one figure pacing nervously under a flickering lamp, Marcia Tate. She'd been out there for almost an hour, rehearsing apologies to her reflection in the HOA office window, wiping tears no one could see. Finally, she gathered the courage to knock on my door. I opened it halfway. She flinched, like she expected armed guards beside me. I came to apologize, she stammered. Her voice trembled, stripped of the arrogance she wore like armor. I made assumptions. I didn't know who you were. I sighed, exhaustion pressing into my bones. That's the problem, I said quietly. You didn't need to know. You just needed to leave me alone. She wrung her hands, eyes darting helplessly. I'm resigning from the HOA, she blurted. Effective immediately. I can't run a community when I don't even know the people living in it. For the first time, her voice sounded human, not bossy, not controlling, just scared and tired. Before I could respond, headlights appeared at the end of the street. A patrol car. Not the federal SUVs from earlier, but the police. Only this time, it wasn't a confrontation. It was a visit. The police chief himself stepped out, the same man who had defended me the day before when Marcia claimed my ID was fake. He had the kind of walk that said this wasn't routine. "Evening," he called out, his tone low and serious. "Sorry to come by so late, but we need to talk." Marcia took a panicked step back. I should go," she whispered, and rushed off into the dark like she was fleeing a crime scene. The chief waited until she disappeared before walking up my porch. "We ran your clearance again," he said quietly, glancing around to make sure no nosy neighbor was listening. "And we got a request from higher up, a request to assist with your protection, if needed." My jaw tightened. "Protection? From what?" He hesitated. "Something's happening behind the scenes. Something big. Your old classification wasn't just checked, it was flagged." A chill went down my spine, the kind that only comes from instincts honed in dangerous places. "Flagged for what?" He shook his head. "They didn't tell us. They just said you're now considered potentially reactivatable." I felt the world tilt for a moment. Potentially reactivatable. The term was worse than an order. It meant they were preparing for something requiring people like me, people with skills that governments don't admit exist. The chief lowered his voice further. "Whatever you were, whatever you did, someone out there remembers. And they want to know if you're ready." I looked back into my house, at the half-open classified folder on the table, its red seals glowing in the faint lamplight like warnings from another lifetime. I thought about moving here, hoping for a simple life, a quiet life, a life where my past finally stayed in the past. But that hope was dissolving like fog in sunlight. The chief stepped closer, speaking softly. "If you choose not to go back, you need to tell them soon. If you choose to accept, they'll activate you within days." I exhaled slowly, the weight of every choice pressing into my chest. "What would you do?" I asked him. He studied me for a long moment, then gave a tired smile. "Me? I'd choose the life that lets me sleep at night." He tipped his cap and walked off, leaving me alone with a future I never wanted to face again. I closed the door, sat down, and finally opened the classified folder completely, knowing that whatever was inside was going to change everything.